There are two people who exist on the same territory who both feel a deep sense of attachment to that land. In 2008, when our honored guest was the Prime Minister of Israel, he actually made an offer to the Palestinians to put an end to this conflict with a two-state solution. There's a lot of different interpretations for what actually happened in 2008 in terms of what was offered and what the response was from the other side. Mr. Ehud Olmert has been very generous with offering us his time of his busy schedule. We want to thank him for this opportunity. I want to pass it on to Mr. Olmert, who was the mayor of Jerusalem from 1993 to 2003, and he served as the Prime Minister of Israel from 2009. So, Mr. Olmert, what exactly happened in 2008? What did you offer the Palestinians, and what was the response? What went wrong is our conversation theme. Over to you.
Well, number one, there is a universal perception that we negotiated in 2008, and actually we started maybe at the end of 2007 in the famous Annapolis conference, which was organized by the then President of the United States, George W. Bush, and his Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice. We started negotiations a year earlier, in December of 2006. So by November of 2007, we have gone a long way already in this process of negotiations, much longer than most other observers realized or were aware of. It is important only because I don't want that anyone will have a misperception or a misunderstanding that we needed someone to trigger the process by creating this conference. Conference in Annapolis was very important, very, very positive, and it certainly was a landmark in the process of negotiations. But the process itself started a long earlier, and the importance of the emphasis on this is that by the time that we came to Annapolis, there was already a very strong basis of trust between myself as the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the Palestinian Authority, Dr. Mahmoud Abbas. The year that started with the meeting that I hosted in the official residence of the Prime Minister in Israel at the end of 2006. This time was used, I think, effectively by both of us in order to, first of all, lay on the table the major issues that ought to be agreed and analyzed and discussed and ultimately accepted by both sides. And also, which is equally important, is to create a kind of trust, which in my mind, without which it is almost impossible to reach an agreement. You can agree on the words, you can agree on the sound of the statements made, but if there is no trust on a personal basis between the major personalities that run the process, it is not likely to succeed. At the end of the day, it will not help. So we worked a lot on both sides in order to create that kind of trust between the two of us. And the Annapolis conference was a very important landmark, which exposed to the entire world, international community, that the Israeli Prime Minister, the Palestinian President can stand together on the same stage with a very friendly and very supportive President of the United States and talk and shake hands and express joint hopes for further negotiations that will lead to peace. So it was a very important event, but we started earlier. We continued right afterwards in our discussions, and by May of 2008, I was ready. I was ready with a comprehensive concept that was based on the principles that I've discussed with the president of the Palestinian Authority. And when I made up my mind about the basic principles, I summoned the then Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, and I shared it with her, and she was absolutely overwhelmed by what she heard. And she said that she writes it in her book, No Higher Honor, which she wrote afterwards. So she dedicated quite a few pages to describe this process. She says that she was so stunned by the proposals that I've outlined in our discussion when I invited her to have a private dinner with me at the residence of the Prime Minister, that she couldn't believe that she actually heard what I said to her about the proposed agreement. And we didn't eat anything because every time that the waiters came with food, I pushed them back and I said, no, because the discussion between us was very intense, very emotional, very, very, very dramatic in a way for both of us. For me to spell it out to the Secretary of State of America, to her to, as she wrote in her book, to have the privilege of hearing first time in history from the Prime Minister of Israel that he is ready to share the city of Jerusalem, the Arab city, to go to the Arab Palestinian state, and the Jewish city, of course, to remain the capital of the Jewish state. But the first time she heard it, she thought it was so dramatic that she writes in a book that she went back to the hotel. She shared the content of the discussions that she had with me, with her most trusted assistants, but she didn't tell them anything about what I said about Jerusalem. And she called the president, and the president was not at the Oval Office, so she talked with Secretary Steve Hadley, and she told him, tell the president that he was right about Olmert, that Olmert indeed wants peace. And then she added, however, he will die before he can achieve it, because they assassinated Rabin for far less. That's what she writes in her book, that she said to the president on the day that I shared with her the items, the basic details of what was my peace plan. So in any event, this was in May of 2008.
Can I just while you're talking, before you get into the details, can I just put up the map that's actually floating around on the internet that everyone has understood to be the Olmert offer? I don't know whether this is an accurate map or not, but I'd love for you to sort of confirm or tell us. Give me just 2 seconds. I'll put the map up and I'll get your thoughts, just for our audience's benefit as well. So give me a moment. If you do a Google search on the Olmert peace plan, this is what comes up. Now, we can hear it straight from the man himself. Is that accurate? Is this what you actually offered the Palestinians?
I'm trying to understand. Areas to be annexed to Israel, and areas, the red are the areas to be transferred to the
That's
Palestinians.
Right. The red's meant to be the land swap, which is currently under Israeli control, which according to this map, you offered to Mahmoud Abbas. The yellow is meant to be the Palestinian state. And from what I have read of the details, you offered to build a passage connecting Gaza and the West Bank. And then the blue in the West Bank is meant to be the major settlements, which would end up with Israel. So does that look roughly right?
it's not accurate. It's not accurate.
Okay.
The territories that are supposed to be annexed to Israel are far bigger than what we were talking about. We were talking about 5%. Actually, I would have agreed at the end to 4.5% of the entire territory, and I think here it's more. And the size of territories that we were prepared to exchange, because the whole thing was sweeping territories between them and us, so that the basis for the territorial solution will be still the 67 borders. That was the guiding line. We would have swapped territories the same size that we take from them. We give them territories pre-67, and I think it's not balanced here.
Yeah. Okay.
So actually, the map is more favorable to the Palestinians than what it shows here.
Right. I see. Okay. No. So can you carry on with your story then? I just wanted to get some clarity around that. Yeah. Yep.
So anyway, we continued the discussions, and in September of 2008, I presented President Mahmoud Abbas with a map and with the details concerning the agreement, which comprised of the following major principles. I'm not going into all the details. It will take us much more time than we have. Number one, that the territorial solution will be based on the 67 lines, but there will be about 4.5 to 5 point something percent, depending on the final tuning negotiations, that will be annexed to Israel in the 3 demographic centers in the West Bank, which were inhabited by Israelis over the years of occupation. And in exchange for these territories, we will allow them to annex territories that were part of the state of Israel pre-67. So there will be balance between what we annex and what we give up. Okay, and the areas that we would have swapped with them will be from the north all the way down to the south, including near Jerusalem, so that we will not just give them a part of the desert and tell them, okay, this is equal to what we have annexed from the territories, but equal size and equal quality of land. Then there will be also a highway that will connect Gaza to the West Bank. When in one of our discussions, President Mahmoud Abbas said, I want precisely the borders of 67. So I say to him, okay, President, in that case, you will have 2 states, the Palestinian states, because there will be no connection between Gaza and the West Bank. He said, why? It should be 1 state. He said, look, if you want accurate, precise, geographic, territorial pattern as it was, then Gaza and the West Bank were never connected. You want them to be connected? So you don't want to have a precise, accurate territory as it was in 67. There may be a room for some adjustments. So that is opened up. And I said, I'm ready to have a highway of 40 kilometers that will cross the south part of Israel, and which will allow a direct connection between Gaza and the West Bank. Then there were also all kinds of security arrangements. I don't want to go into this, but this did not require the annexation of the Jordan Valley to the state of Israel, which I didn't require. The Palestinian state ought to have remained non-militarized, and this was absolutely understandable and acceptable to both sides. The Arab part of Jerusalem would be the Palestinian capital. The Jewish part of Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel. And the Holy Basin will not be under any sovereignty, but will be under the trust managed by 5 nations authorized by the UN Security Council, approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations, and it will comprise of the following states: the Saudi Arabians, Jordan, Palestinians, the State of Israel, and the Americans. This will be the trust that will run the Holy Basin, including the old city of Jerusalem, and will maintain complete freedom of religion to all believers that want to come to their holy places. Jews, Muslims, Christians, and all others, that care so much for the old city of Jerusalem.
I've just put the map up just for the benefit of our audience that may not be familiar with the geography. If you can just talk us through that. What you're talking about is the square there in the middle. That's where all the holy sites are meant to be. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus had his final moment. And the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as the Western Wall, the side of the Jewish temple, right?
I mean, in principle, is what I say.
Yep.
The Holy Basin will be under no sovereignty. I call it sovereignty of God. Sovereignty of God. No political sovereignty exclusive for anyone. And the issue of the refugees will be resolved within the framework of the Arab Peace Initiative, which was first initiated by the Saudis in Beirut in 2002, I think February 2002, and reconfirmed by the Arab League of Nations in Riyadh in 2007. So I would agree to negotiate within the framework of this peace initiative without accepting or recognizing the right of return under any circumstance. This was clear. The whole concept of the right of return for the Palestinians to return back was totally unacceptable. However, the whole idea of creating a Palestinian state is to allow the Palestinians, wherever they were, in refugee camps across the Middle East, in other countries, to come to the new established sovereign country, which is the Palestinian state, and not to the state of Israel. I think this principle was accepted by the international community, and they were also, it was accepted fundamentally by the Palestinian Authority. So these were the basic principles. We accepted, we discussed it, and I say to the Palestinian leader, listen, let's sign jointly with initials on the map. Let's agree on the wording of a statement that we will make together, and let's go to the UN Security Council meeting next week in order to make a joint statement to the world. That would have been accepted, I think, unanimously by the Security Council of the UN, and then, if necessary, by the General Assembly, with maybe one or two states that will not support it, but overwhelming will have supported it. And then we will call a joint session of Congress with through the invitation of the President of the United States and the Speaker of the House in America, and then we'll go to the European Parliament, and then we'll come to the Middle East, and we'll invite all the world leaders to join us to make the statement of peace. And if necessary, then we'll go to elections in both places, in Israel and in the Palestinian Authority, to approve of this understanding. And I think that that would have been accepted by the majority of Israelis, the majority of the Palestinians, and it would change history, could have changed history.
Yeah. Okay. The obvious question here would be, what was the Palestinian response? I mean, there's all sorts of news stories on the internet. Some say that Abbas rejected it flatly. Other stories say that he walked away. He wanted a map. You couldn't offer him a map. He wanted to draw something on a napkin or something to that effect. Did they say no or yes? What do we make of the response?
Number one, Mahmoud Abbas never said no.
Right.
Not only that he didn't say no, so the whole rumor about him rejecting it flatly is totally untrue. And throughout the period from from then on until today, in every possible occasion, President Abbas emphasizes, and he relays this request to me as well, that I will approve it, that he never said no to me. He never, ever said no to this plan. What he actually said to me was that this map, he says it's very impressive and it sounds very serious, and it's the whole thing is very, very serious. I mean, he was excited and he was very open-minded to the option of making this the framework of the agreement. But he said, you know, I'm not expert on maps, so how can I sign something before I showed it to the experts on our side to examine it? Which I said, fine, take your time. But listen, the General Assembly is now, and the annual meeting of the UN is taking place. Let's take the opportunity and go there together and make a joint statement that will shatter the world. We are making history, I say to him. And I say to him, listen, President, if you don't sign, trust me, it will take more than 50 years before there is a new prime minister in Israel that will offer you something similar to what I do now. This is something extraordinary. It is unprecedented. It's never happened in the history of the conflict that the Prime Minister of Israel agreed to actually share the city of Jerusalem so that the Arab part of the city of Jerusalem will be the Palestinian capital. Take it. I said, I beg you, don't miss the opportunity. He said, let's have our experts sitting tomorrow and running through the map, and if they will have understanding, then, you know, it can fly. But the experts never came the next day. And I think that Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, didn't have that inner power to just make one step further to what he has done up until then. Because there really were not any misunderstandings or any disagreements in this discussion that we had. Not only that he didn't reject it flatly, but it was obvious that he is entirely for it. And he, by the way, says since then, in every possible occasion, including on the Israeli TV, including recently, a year and a half ago, we met in America before the COVID-19 started. We met in New York and we had a joint press conference. And he considered me to be a man of peace, because what I proposed to him was a serious, genuine peace agreement that was never offered, similar of which never offered before or after by any prime minister of Israel. And I think that when if someone will talk to him privately, eye to eye, behind closed doors, he will say that he regrets that he didn't sign it.
Yeah, very interesting. So there is, I mean, it's still, from what you're describing to me, it still sounds like there is some ambiguity there. You're saying that he didn't flatly decline, but at the same time, you're saying that you had to literally beg him to put pen to paper. What do we make of that? I mean, was the deal not concluded? What was the main barrier? Is there a term of his that he was expecting to, which you couldn't sign off on, or was there?
Look, the Palestinian community is very divided.
Yeah.
It's not made up of one group of people with the same opinion, the same attitude, and so on. They have the terrorists, they have the Hamas, they have the jihad, they have the Islamic movement, they have many things.
Yeah.
And therefore, it obviously requires a great deal of courage by the leader of the Palestinians to finally conclude this historic conflict, which is, in a way, the source of livelihood for many different organizations, is that there is a conflict, that they can thrive on the waves of this conflict to promote their agenda. And I think that the divisions within the Palestinian community and the fact that some of of the factions were terrorist factions, which can kill and destroy and easily, were certainly a deterrent to the Palestinian leader. But quite frankly, you know, I can't talk for him. One thing I can say, everything that I describe now is precisely what happened.
Yep.
And I know, and if you will ask Abu Mazen, he will confirm to you that everything that I said was accurate. Okay?
Yeah.
So I think you better interview him and ask him why he didn't decide. But I think that he regrets it very much. He understands now that it could have been a great change in their lives and in the life of the entire Middle East had he signed then.
Well, that's what we all hope for, Mr. Olmert. We understand that there are two people there with a deep and ancient connection to the land, and we need to figure out a way for the two people to coexist in peace and security and solidarity. And it's a matter of figuring out what the best way possible would be. Speaking of that, we're talking here in 2021. As the way forwards, how can this conflict be brought to an end? What do you see as plausible at this point in time?
Look, I'm a great believer in the power of leaders and the significance of leadership and the centrality of inspiring leadership. So if you ask me what at the end can be, what can make it, what can change it, is only one thing. That the leader from our side and the leader from their side will meet together and will have the courage, the guts, the inspiration, the freedom of mind, and the burning of their heart to say, we sit here and we sign an agreement that will change history. That's what lies ahead. The parameters of this agreement are more or less what I said to you before.
Yeah.
You know, with fine-tuning, there can be no alternative to this. I mean, Israel can give the Palestinians the Arab side of Jerusalem for them to declare this part as the capital of the Palestinian state. Okay, we will not be able to give them more. We are not supposed to give them the western part of Jerusalem, right? Which is the capital of the state of Israel. And has always been. We are ready to share the administration of the Holy Basin, which is something that has never been ever proposed by the state of Israel. We are ready to consider some adjustments on the issue, the Palestinian refugee issue, within the framework of the agreement that was proposed by the Palestinians. So by the Arabs, the Saudis, and so on. So, I mean, what else? There have to be, and they must. Now, I don't say that this is the framework of agreement which is approved today by the president of the prime minister of the day or in Israel, Prime Minister Bennett. I don't know. I expect the Israelis and the Palestinians to meet on the basis of this plan, and I think that this can be done.
Okay, so I guess another question that ensues from what you just said is, we obviously know that Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, is quite old, and he's not going to be the leader for all that much longer moving forwards. What do you see as a viable alternative to him? I mean, are there other people on the Palestinian side who could forge good relationships with the Israelis to work this out at the table?
You know, I've been to Australia quite a few times, and I'm familiar and friendly with the last maybe 5 or 6 of your prime ministers. I knew them all. I knew John Howard, and I knew Tony Hamilton, I knew Julia, and I knew them all. And you changed your prime ministers very often in the last 8 years, and you always found someone that was worthy of being prime minister. So why should I say who in the Palestinians, amongst the Palestinians, is qualified to be? They have good people. I think that first and foremost, for me, Mahmoud Abbas is a qualified gentleman, decent, peace-loving person. I like him. I trust him. I would have made peace with him. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for reasons which are beyond my comprehension sometimes. But there are many others that in due course will be in a position to take over and to make an agreement. But who amongst them? I mean, enough problems we have with our own domestic politics. Do you expect me to enter into the diversity amongst the Palestinians? That's too much.
Yep. Okay, well, let's turn our focus to Hamas. Obviously, they're a militant organization. They're in control of Gaza. Israel claims that they've given the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip autonomy since 2005, but yet you have, this situation where rockets continuously do come into Israeli civilian areas. What do you believe is the appropriate response from the Israeli side? From our point of view, it's a real catch-22, because if Israel sits there and does nothing, then they have to deal with the rockets, which no country would tolerate. And if they do respond back, the international community tends to still see Israel as the aggressor. How do we address that issue?
Look, the Hamas is the aggressor. There is no question about it. Mm-hmm. The difference between Israel and the Hamas is that we never initiate any attack on the Palestinians, on the Hamas, certainly not on the Palestinians in Gaza that live in the neighborhoods and in the houses. Mm-hmm. But we do attack sometimes, and we do cause a lot of damage, and we do cause a lot of pain, which is regrettable, but unavoidable, considering the circumstances. When they shoot missiles on the southern part of the state of Israel, they don't shoot at any military target. They shoot to the townships and cities with the purpose of killing civilians. Mm-hmm. So this is Hamas. Now, I'll tell you what. I'm not optimistic to the degree that I think that there is a genuine chance of sitting down with the Hamas and making an agreement. Although, I mean, you should ask yourself, I mean, what the heck? What do they want? We pulled out from Gaza. Mm. By a consensus of the international community, we are not occupying 1 centimeter, square feet of Gaza. Mm-hmm. But why do they have to fight with us? Mm. However, my idea is that it is not impossible that Israel should sit with representatives of the Hamas, rather than negotiating with them through Egypt. Mm. I have a lot of respect for President Sisi and for his assistance in creating a certain process of an indirect dialogue between us and the Hamas. Maybe there should be a room for a direct dialogue for one purpose. I don't think that we can reach an agreement with them on resolving the political issues outstanding between us and them. Mm-hmm. But we certainly can resolve the issues of shooting and terrorist attacks and so on. So, we can define the contact with the Hamas for the purpose of understanding, laying on the ground all the parameters that will guarantee that there will not be any military exchange between them and us. By the way, at the end of the day, they can only lose from this because we are stronger. We can destroy them. Mm-hmm. Okay? What we do have to do, though, and that's what I propose, and I propose it here in Israel, which is slightly more difficult than to share it with, person in Perth or in Sydney. Okay, is that we should change the paradigm of the Israeli influence in Gaza. We should help them build a deep water harbor. We should help them create more jobs. We should make sure that they are given the opportunity to have electricity 24/7. We should help them come to work in Israel. I mean, not everyone, but a sizable number. In other words, we should create an opportunity, a room for a change in the quality of life for the Palestinians in Gaza to the degree that they will have an interest not to be the captives of the Hamas in the political and military aggression against the state of Israel. And the only way to do it is to lay the foundations for an improved quality of life for the Palestinians in Gaza.
So, Mr. Olmert, I've had another question come through. So let's say if we were to move towards reviving something like the Olmert model from 2008, which we've discussed, and Israel was to provide even further autonomy to a quasi-Palestinian state in the West Bank, how do
not
we
autonomy, I'm sorry, not Israeli will not provide autonomy. They will be a Palestinian state, sovereign and independent in the territories that Israel will pull out from, and they will be a full member of the United Nations, and they will realize and exercise their right for self-determination, full stop, period.
Yeah, that's what you offered. So I'm saying if we were to revive that, I'll change the word autonomy to full independence. Like, let's say we shifted towards reviving that model. What's then preventing Hamas from taking over the West Bank? I mean, Hamas is a separate party to Fatah, which is PLO, right? If you had Hamas on both sides of Israel in Gaza and the West Bank, how does that ensure the security of Israel?
Look, I hope that it will not happen because I want that the Palestinians will be governed by a bloc of a political bloc which will be democratic, which will refrain from terror and so on and so forth. The one thing which doesn't really worry me is the military threat of the Hamas. Not that I like it, but at any given time, under any possible circumstance that you can have in mind, we can destroy Hamas, and we can destroy Hamas in Gaza or in any place that they will be. They know it, we know it. So let's not blow over the real proportion, the threat to Israel's security. Certainly, we don't like to have Qassam rockets shot at our cities, and we will respond with the utmost aggression and strength against anyone that threatens the lives of innocent people in Israel. But there is no question about it. What I say is not an excuse in order to refrain from responding to their aggression. On the contrary. But I'm not losing 1 minute of sleep at night because of the possible threat to the security of the state of Israel by the Hamas. We are so much stronger, more powerful, that we can devastate them anytime we want.
Okay, there's a question that's come through that the narrative that is taught to people is obviously it's presented in a peculiar way. Do you think more could be done to improve the way children are taught about this conflict in order to minimize?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, there is no question about it. The Palestinians should change the curricula in the schools. They should provide them with a different account of the history of the conflict. They're not the one that they have created in order to serve the propaganda machine of an enemy, but rather to establish a genuine, accurate story of the history of this conflict with an aim of changing the hearts and attitudes of people, and certainly children in the West Bank and Gaza, in order to make them ready for the kind of cooperation which can be built between us and the Palestinians. I must say one thing, and, excuse me if it's not a direct response for a particular question that may have been asked.
Mm-hmm.
Once we separate from the Palestinians, in other words, once there is a clear borderline between us and them, and they exercise their political rights for self-determination, they are not under the occupation of Israel, you would be absolutely surprised to the extent that we will cooperate, and they will cooperate with us. They will become the most powerful nation amongst the Arab countries. They are bright, they are ambitious, they are energetic, they are hungry, they are ready to thrust forward with all the energies that they have accumulated over so many years in order to realize their rights and their opportunities. And the only country which can cooperate with them and together make a dramatic impact on the entire region is the State of Israel. They know it, we know it. We don't really hate them, they don't really hate us. There are some terrorist groups amongst them which are trying to act against history. That will not help. History will be stronger. And the desire for rehabilitation, the desire for some kind of trust and understanding will be stronger than hate.
Okay. Mr. Olmert, thank you for that. We'll have to make this the final question. I'm mindful that you need to go shortly, so this will be the final question. I've had one come through about your thoughts on the Trump peace plan 2020.
We don't need to spend so much time on something which was not viable in the first place, was not made to be. It was just one of those things that President Trump created. Can you imagine a peace plan to make peace between Israel and the Palestinians that the Palestinians were not even consulted about the peace plan? I mean, how can you seriously imagine that it can become a basis for negotiations? I advised President Abbas not to say no, because I thought that it was, useless to say no again.
Yep.
But there was not a chance for the deal of the century that was proposed by President Trump. It was obvious to everyone that was familiar with the details, and a lot of time was wasted unnecessarily. We could have done a great deal more in a way of creating the right path towards peace.
Yep. Just as a quick follow-up to that, Mr. Olmert, is it not true, though, that the Americans did invite the Palestinian Authority to participate in a discussion about that plan in Manama in Bahrain in mid-2019?
Maybe, I don't know. You have to ask the Americans.
Okay.
And you have to ask the Palestinians why they turned it down if there was an invitation. Let me tell you something. I think that we have been treated the same way as the Palestinians by the Trump administration. I'd have been very insulted. So I can imagine what they felt. But I don't know, and I don't want to speak for them.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
From where I see things, I thought the Trump administration was actually quite favorable towards Israel in, recognizing the Golan and recognizing Jerusalem as a capital. But look, I'm very mindful of the time, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you, and I hope that we had enough people that would be able to absorb what we have discussed and further it up.
Absolutely, would love to host you again sometime, and would love to catch up with you next time we're on a delegation in Israel. So, thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Take care. All the best to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.